Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be talking about my Week 9 waiver wire targets for the 2019 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about some news around the National Football League that pertains to fantasy football going into Week 9. Then we're going to be going over my waiver wire targets at the running back, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, and defensive positions for the week. There's a lot of players that are injured. There's a lot of teams on bye week, so it's very vital to go up and pick up as many of these contributors as possible so that for the coming weeks you have ample lineups that are going to be able to at least help you pick up some W's as we approach the fantasy football playoffs. Before we begin, let me remind all of you, if you haven't yet already, click that subscribe button, join the community. Also, click that bell notification button to stay up to date on my latest content, and do not forget to click the like button on today's video. Thank you very much. Hey guys, I hope everyone is doing well. All right, so Week 8 was quite the extravagant turn of events, huh? What did we learn from Week 8? Well, we learned that first and foremost, the Cardinals' backfield doesn't want to stay healthy, right? And we'll get into that with news. And then we also learned that Alvin Kamara just doesn't even need to come back because Latavius Murray is out here catching 9 passes on 12 targets, over 100 yards again, having an incredible week. And also, not only can the Kansas City Chiefs not stop running backs, but they can't stop running backs even in the passing game. Aaron Jones had a monster Sunday night game with some ridiculous performance there. And then there's another ridiculous performance from another running back by the name of Tevin Coleman. Decided, you know what, I'm going to just score 4 touchdowns this week against the Carolina Panthers because why not? Incredible performance by him without a doubt in my mind. But there was a lot of guys that at least we saw a little bit of action from, like David Montgomery, who we hadn't seen do anything much of all season long. 27 carries, 135 rushing yards. There we go. Now we're getting into that rhythm. Hopefully they can continue to stay suit with that, and Matt Nagy is going to give him the ball rest of season because Mitch Trubisky, I mean, we all know what's wrong with Mitch Trubisky. Moving on, other guys, rookie running back Miles Sanders had a pretty good week himself, and Jordan Howard. Both of these guys ran all over the Buffalo Bills defense, a defense that really could not stop anything on the ground and through the air, to be honest. So both of them had pretty good games overall. Outside of that, you know, there's a lot of good running back tandems, right? We know Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray, they're going to be incredible. Jamal Williams, Aaron Jones, great. And then, you know, Miles Sanders, Jordan Howard as of late have been ridiculous. Singletary, another rookie running back, had himself at least a pretty good performance, caught 4 passes, caught himself a touchdown, finally getting back into that rhythm so that hopefully as the weeks progress and we get into those easier matchups like this coming week against the Redskins, he should be able to at least put something together in terms of a good performance. But overall, we learned a lot of things this week. We also learned that Matt Schaub is still a decent quarterback in the National Football League, and so is Matt Moore. Somehow, these two old veterans that have been in the league for quite some time are still able to move the ball and play well in the National Football League, which is absolutely ridiculous. All right, so moving into this week, in terms of news in the National Football League, earlier this morning, obviously the trade deadline has not been met, and a lot of teams are still looking to make trades, and they're doing so as much as they possibly can. So earlier this morning, Kenyan Drake, who we anticipated to be traded, has been traded to the Arizona Cardinals. Why? Because not only is David Johnson still injured, Chase Edmonds sustained an injury yesterday, which pretty much knocked him out of the game. Kenyan Drake, they wanted to move him. They want to go ahead and rebuild that team. They want to acquire picks. They're going to get some, you know, BS 7th round pick probably for him, but at least they get something for him instead of just letting him walk as a free agent this coming season. So he gets traded to the Cardinals. He has a little bit more value than he did, obviously, because he is a receiving back. He is a capable dynamic 3-down back, potentially. So if, in fact, there is going to be time missed, Kenyan Drake, who we'll talk about in a little bit as a waiver wire pickup, has a lot of value going forward. And it also opens up room for the value of whoever was left in Miami, who we'll talk about. Other than that, Joe Flacco has a neck injury. He will miss this coming week against the Browns. That's probably going to hurt Courtland Sutton. I don't know who their replacement is going to be or who they decide to put there. It could be potentially Drew Lock, who's a rookie. So we'll just have to wait and see what they do with that current position of the quarterback in Denver. But I don't really think it matters. Obviously, anybody can come in and probably play better than Flacco. Flacco hasn't been great at all thus far this season. But outside of that, there's obviously been some trades here and there. There's a lot of rumors that still the Packers and the Patriots are still looking to trade for a wide receiver, so only time will tell if anything that way gets done. but only time. Yeah, again, it's still early. I think there's a lot of work to be done in the next couple days, so just get ready for it. All right, moving on. Like I said a little bit earlier, this coming week there's a lot of teams on bye. As the weeks progress, 4 teams, 6 teams, 4 teams will be on bye each of the next 3 weeks. So this coming week, the Falcons, the Saints, the Rams, and the Bengals are all on bye week this week. That's a pretty good chunk of players there, right? You have your Matt Ryans, who will at least have a little bit of a break. Julio, Michael Thomas, Todd Gurley, Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray, Joe Mixon, who somehow had a magical, fantastic week this past week against a defense that should have been able to stop him, but they just really couldn't. But anyway, those teams are on bye. Again, I'll say it again, the Falcons, the Saints, the Rams, and the Bengals. So let's talk about this coming week. Let's talk about some waiver wire targets in terms of the running back position. Starting off with my number 1, as of right now, is Mark Walton. Now, what I want to suggest that everyone does at this moment in time is go ahead and go and see if Mark Walton is available on your waiver wire, because he doesn't play until later this afternoon on Monday Night Football against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, why am I suggesting you go and check out a guy like Mark Walton? Well, he is going to be a waiver wire pickup. A lot of people are going to go after him, and they're going to address their needs at the running back position. And a guy like Mark Walton, who was sharing the backfield with Kenyan Drake and Kalen Ballage, as of right now, seems to be the front runner for the starting position, as Kalen Ballage does not touch the ball outside of the red zone, and Kenyan Drake is now gone. So Mark Walton is potentially a 3-down back going forward. Now, I understand having a 3-down back for the Miami Dolphins is not as valuable as having a 3-down back for any other organization in the National Football League as of right now. But I do believe he presents a pretty good amount of value just looking at what he was able to do last week. 14 touches, 66 yards. We've talked about this guy in the past, especially in the last 2 weeks, because we knew that Kenyan Drake was going to be traded. This guy would eventually have value. Now, going into this coming week, obviously you don't want to play him against Pittsburgh, but if you need to, you go ahead and do though. But what we're picking him up for is the fantasy football playoffs. Now, his matchups for the fantasy football playoffs, weeks 14, 15, and 16, are extremely juicy, and I think that there's a potential that this Miami Dolphins team does not want to go 0-16, and they're going to have to win a game here or there, and there's a potential in those coming weeks that he does. In week 14, plays against the Jets, plays against the New York Giants in week 15, and then in week 16 plays against the Cincinnati Bengals. For those of you who know, in terms of giving up points to the running back position, the Cincinnati Bengals are number 1, the Giants are number 5, and the Jets are number 6. Those teams are terrible against opposing running backs, and there is a chance that Mark Walton in the fantasy football playoffs can be a flex contributor to your team, so you might as well pick him up now. If you can, and there is some dead weight on the back of your bench, you can drop and pick him up right now without having to waste a waiver, because that is a potential opportunity, because he has not played yet and he's not locked in to a game for this week. So go ahead, probably do that and get it done right now perhaps. All right, anyway, there's Mark Walton. We're going to talk about number 2, Adrian Peterson. This coming week, Adrian Peterson gets to play against the Buffalo Bills. Now, I'm assuming Adrian Peterson is not available in your league. But if in fact he is, I'd always want to mention this because I know many of you play in smaller leagues, maybe 8-10 team leagues. He might be available in your league. If in fact he is, the Washington Redskins are going to be playing against the Buffalo Bills. And like I mentioned a little bit earlier, the Buffalo Bills could not stop the run. Jordan Howard, Miles Sanders, both of them combined for over 180 rushing yards, completely destroyed that defense, whether it was on the ground, through the air. And Adrian Peterson, as we know, I understand Derrius Guice could be coming back soon, who is a potential guy you might want to pick up. But as of right now, Chris Thompson's injured. Derrius Guice, I'm not sure exactly where his current injury is sitting. I know he's been working out, but is he going to come back this week? I don't know. Adrian Peterson, as of right now, is not a bad option for this week for those of you who are in need, considering the bye weeks that are at hand. You can go ahead and pick him up, put him on your roster, and honestly have a pretty good week here against the Buffalo defense. Like I mentioned, the Buffalo is I said it last week, Buffalo's a flaccid 5-1, and they got smacked by a 3-4 team, and it's not a surprise. Schedules make a big difference in the National Football League. Anyway, moving on, let's talk about my number 3, Kenyan Drake. Like I mentioned, Kenyan Drake will be joining the Arizona Cardinals via the trade that was pretty much established earlier this morning. Now, I don't think this brings an immense amount of value to Kenyan Drake considering the upcoming schedule. This coming week, they got to play against the 49ers, and then in 2 weeks, they got to play against the 49ers again. That's not fun. That defense is locked down solid. Joey Bosa's brother Nick Bosa's coming off the edge, murking everybody, sacks left and right. That defense as a whole, their defensive line is just incredible, obviously. They've spent so many first-round picks on that bunch of guys. But as of right now, in terms of value, Kenyan Drake is going to be a starting back for the time being until one of those two guys, Edmonds and or David Johnson, wants to return. I think the Arizona Cardinals probably anticipate those two guys to miss a significant amount of time. Therefore, they went and made this deal. And there's a reason why they're going to use Kenyan Drake because he's a dynamic back. But again, the matchups coming forth are not great. Let me see. What is this? What is this report? Derrius Guice was a full participant in practice today. See, now we're breaking the news. So I want to go ahead and let's go ahead and let's readjust here. We're talking about Kenyan Drake, sure. Whether or not if he's available, you can pick him up because he's going to be a starting running back. So that's always valuable. But Derrius Guice, a guy that now that I'm hearing he's fully participated, that is a great sign. And he probably should take priority over Adrian Peterson because he is the future of this organization. And he's the guy that you probably want to go ahead and pick up. Goodness gracious, the vibrations of my phone. You want to go ahead and pick him up and make sure he is on roster. He's not here. But now that I've gotten full confirmation from the instant report while I'm recording this, at least we go ahead and have a little bit of an easier time with that. So Derrius Guice, remember that. All right, moving on. Number 4, Devin Singletary. Like I mentioned, Devin Singletary, a couple weeks ago, I was on the Devin Singletary train. Obviously, didn't have a good week against Miami, which he should have, but then again, it's okay. Whatever, no problem. This past week, played a lot better, was able to get more involved in the passing game, still not getting a lot of work on the ground. Frank Gore's pretty much locking that down. But in the coming weeks, like I've mentioned, the schedule is far too easy. Washington, Cleveland, Miami that 3-week schedule going forward, not a bad option, especially for those of you who are looking for someone to kind of throw into that position of the flex potentially and, try to find some production, especially when bye weeks are hitting hard. The bye-apocalypse is on its way, and you want to go ahead and adjust and make sure that you have enough depth at the running back position or at the flex position to go ahead and adjust accordingly. So if he's still available, I don't think he's a bad option going forward because he is another one of these rookie running backs that will be the future of this backfield. And they're going to, over time, give him more touches and give him more opportunity to be successful. All right, moving on to number 5, Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert, even though Tevin Coleman had a 4-touchdown game and Matt Breida, he didn't have a touchdown, but he still looked good in that game. Raheem Mostert is a ridiculously talented running back, and he is the third-string running back on his respective team. Now, what exactly does that mean? Why am I suggesting him? Well, this coming Thursday night against the Arizona Cardinals, the 49ers have a very, very easy matchup in my opinion. And I think it is going to be a one-sided affair. After what I saw the 49ers do to the Carolina Panthers, just completely destroy them on all facets of the game, I think Raheem Mostert is going to be used heavily in the second half, similar to how he was used on Sunday. He's going to be able to see some potential usage there if, in fact, it's a closer game, which I doubt it's going to be. If it, in fact, is a closer game, then you'll see less of Raheem Mostert. But I do believe because of how bad the Arizona Cardinals are up front offensive line and how good that defense is, and that defensive line, they're elite at this point. It's going to lead to a pretty sizable lead for this 49ers offense in the second half. Raheem Mostert could have some value. All right, moving on to number 6. Trade Carson. Okay, really quickly. It's very interesting, right? We all thought that Ty Johnson will be the starting running back for the Detroit Lions because why not, right? He came in, he's been the number 2 of that team for this entire season. But all of a sudden, Matt Patricia decided, you know what? I'm going to be the new Bill Belichick, and I'm going to go ahead and throw the wrench right into the system and not let anybody know who my starting running back is. I'm going to use Trey Carson and go ahead and screw everybody over. And not only that, Trey Carson's going to play bad just so that it looks like my decision was even worse than I made it. Just regardless. The entire issue I have is with the secrecy around playing these guys or their health and all this. It continues to piss me off. But that being said, this is supposedly the starting running back going forward for the Detroit Lions. I don't think that's going to last very long. I thought Kenyan Drake would be traded to the Lions. That's not the case. So if in fact you're looking for somebody who's playing more than Ty Johnson, Carson's the guy. All right, moving on. Let's talk about some wide receivers because, goodness, the running back position just pisses me off sometimes. All right, Week 9 waiver wire targets for the wide receiver position. The first 3 names, I can clump them all together. If, in fact, any of these 3 guys are available, I believe they need to be picked up. Let me tell you why. All 3 of them have been hit with an injury bug. They've missed significant amount of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and I do believe going into Week 9, which they should be healthy. Obviously, Tyrell Williams and the Raiders passed their bye week. Marquise Brown and the Ravens passed their bye week. Christian Kirk still will need to do his bye week, but I do believe going forward, these three guys are extremely valuable, and if they are available somehow in your league, they need to be picked up. I doubt that they are. In a 12-team league, they're typically already rostered, but for those of you who somehow somebody dropped them in your league, go and pick them up this coming week because they're going to have a lot of value going rest of the season, especially for those who've already surpassed their bye weeks. All right, moving on to number 4, because all three of those guys can be clumped together. Moving on to number 4, DK Metcalf. I was talking about this on the Patreon live stream that we did on Saturday. DK Metcalf was the number 2. He was tied for number 2 in red zone targets in the National Football League, but prior to this past week, had 0 receptions on 9 targets, which was pretty ridiculous. This past week, he was finally found in the end zone and in the red zone, scored 2 receiving touchdowns, extremely valuable. And I think going forward, if this is a guy that, like we're anticipating, is going to be used more and more in this offense with the absence of a tight end position, he is a big body, big frame guy that in the red zone can act as their Will Disley or Jimmy Graham-esque kind of player that they are missing. DK Metcalf can be that, and I think from this past week, we're seeing continuous strides towards that greatness that we are hoping that DK Metcalf can potentially find going forward. And I think as the number 4 option, really the only reason he's not number 1 is because the other guys just had to make sure that they were already rostered because, again, DK Metcalf going forward, easy strength of schedule for the Seahawks wide receiver core, and should be pretty good going forward. Anyway, let's talk about number 5, Chris Conley. Chris Conley in the last 2 weeks been insane. He's been very good in terms of targets, in terms of usage. The guy's had over 100 receiving yards in the last 2 games, scoring touchdowns left, right, and center. Chris Conley has, as of right now, kind of established himself as one of the top 3. DJ Chark is still getting his work. D.D. Westbrook still getting his work. But Chris Conley, consistent as ever as of late. Obviously, Gardner Minshew in this offense has been playing well. They are 4-4 for a reason because they continue to win games and play well in the passing game. This is a guy that if you are in need of a wide receiver, not a bad option. I don't think he's a fantastic play. I think he's a wide receiver 3 at best, but at least he's been consistent and he is pulling the attention of Gardner Minshew. There's even guys like Keelan Cole that are catching touchdowns on a weekly basis for this Jaguars offense. This offense is rolling and they're playing well, so anybody associated with it is going to have value. And as of right now, Chris Conley, not a bad try if you need to pick up a wide receiver. Moving on to number 6, Alex Erickson. Second week in a row, another one of these guys. Great amount of targets, great usage, and good outcome. All in all, in a PPR, Alex Erickson, pretty good play. In the last 2 weeks, let me see here. Where are these target counts? Thank you very much. All right, Alex Erickson in the last 2 weeks in terms of targets, 14, obviously against the Jacksonville Jaguars. That was a great game. But this past week, 7 targets, 6 receptions, 97 yards. Pretty good game right there. In a full PPR, this is a 15-point player. And with AJ Green not really coming back anytime soon, I don't know where he is. Alex Erickson continues to be a handcuff safety blanket for Andy Dalton because as of late, Tyler Boyd, nowhere to be found, MIA. So Alex Erickson, not a bad option, especially for a guy that is playing in the slot and moving on the outside here and there, not a bad option. All right, moving on to number 7, Josh Reynolds. All right, here's the thing about Josh Reynolds. I know they're going on bye week, and I know the Rams are not playing this week, but Brandon Cooks sustained another concussion. This is the second of this season, and I think that's 3 or 4 in the last 2 years. This is not good for his health and his future. This is definitely that they're going to take something they're going to take seriously and potentially not even play Brandon Cooks for the coming weeks. Like I mentioned with Sterling Shepard, and the reason why Sterling Shepard has been missing for so long is because of the fact that he has gotten concussions twice in the last 30 days. That's not great. You cannot function after that. I mean, the grade of concussion after that just becomes unsustainable, and you're really risking your life going forward. So, as of right now, I think Brandon Cooks is going to miss time, even after this bye week. If he somehow manages to get out of concussion protocol by the time next week rolls around and week 10's here, I will be surprised because he's sustained far too many concussions in a short amount of time. And typically, in terms of the NFL and their concussion protocol and their stance on that, they're going to have him out for quite some time, potentially up to a month. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about number 8, Danny Amendola. Again, one of these guys, similar to Chris Conley, similar to Alex Erickson, has been really good in the last couple of weeks. Now, what did we see from that game? We obviously saw the Detroit Lions play well offensively. They were able to air it out. And then we also saw that for some reason, Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones cannot both play well in a singular game. But as of late, we have Danny Amendola producing very well. In the last 2 weeks, 19 targets, 16 receptions, 200 receiving yards. Pretty good in the last 2 weeks. I mean, in half-point PPR, 14.5 and 13.5 in the last 2 weeks. Another one of these guys that going forward in the matchups, playing against Oakland this coming week, then Chicago, then Dallas, then Washington. I'm not really too angry at the schedule. I think it's a pretty juicy lineup coming forward, and I think if he's going to continue to be used at this rate, similar to how he was in Week 1, and he's healthy, Danny Amendola could be a big contributor for this Lions offense and find some value. He's my last option there at the wide receiver position. Let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about tight ends. Tight ends are dry. We know that. But Jonnu Smith, great time, perfect. Delaney Walker could potentially be moved. Obviously, he's aging. Mariota's gone, so no one's throwing him the ball. And Jonnu Smith is just a better tight end as of right now. He's younger. He's more athletic. He's got more speed. He's more talented overall. And I think Jonnu Smith is the future tight end of this team. He was last season. He's continuing to show that he is improving. I had a big game this week against Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was an easy matchup. But going forward, if he is going to continuously be used, Ryan Tannehill does not mind targeting him. And he's a guy that needs to be picked up and used because if you're in need of a tight end, this guy could be a pretty good contributor. Moving on to number 2, Darren Fells. For the second, how many times in this year has he scored 2 touchdowns? Was it 3 times already? Darren Fells is unbelievable. A guy that really just, sometimes he shows up, sometimes he doesn't. And the inconsistencies kind of hurt, but as of late, he literally is like an every other week kind of guy. Scores a touchdown, and then the next week scores 2 touchdowns, and then he disappears for a couple weeks, then scores 2 touchdowns again. There are some weeks in which he is just heavily targeted. And there are some weeks that he disappears, literally. Like the games he's good is when he gets 6+ targets. The games he's bad is when it's 2-1, 3 targets. But anyway, the whole point is Darren Fells is being used continuously in this offense. Down in the red zone, he is their number 1 option as of late. It hasn't been DeAndre Hopkins. It hasn't been Carlos Hyde. It has been Darren Fells. And with an offense like the Houston Texans who are moving the ball consistently down into the red zone, Darren Fells not a bad option for those of you who are looking for a guy that is continuously seeing a lot of targets in the red zone and being a pretty big contributor in terms of touchdowns. Moving on, why is Sam Darnold here? Why the heck is Sam Darnold? I think I may have... Interesting. We're going to move on. Number 4, Ryan Griffen. I don't know why Sam Darnold's there. Very interesting, though. I'm assuming from the graphic that I made before with the quarterbacks, he's probably at number 3. And I forgot to change it. Regardless, speaking of the Jets and Sam Darnold, we're talking about Ryan Griffen. Chris Herndon has not been healthy. He has not returned from that hamstring injury that we were made aware once he was off his suspension in week 6. Since then, Ryan Griffen, this past week, 2 receiving touchdowns and a 2-point conversion. A guy had a monster week. Saw a good amount of targets, especially down in the red zone. A guy that going forward, similar to Darren Fells. Obviously, I trust the Houston offense far more than I do the Jets. But again, another one of these guys, if you are in really desperate need, could be an option. Moving on to number 5, Vance McDonald. Has not played this week, but I do believe the upcoming schedule for Vance McDonald should be good. Let me see here. Thank you. All right, pulling up his schedule as we speak. All right, Vance McDonald obviously gets to play Miami, which is great. But Indianapolis, the Rams, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Cleveland again, Arizona. These aren't bad matchups. And if, in fact, you are in need of a tight end, I know he hasn't done anything all season long. And hopefully this, tonight against the Miami Dolphins, he can maybe do something so that at least we get a little bit more confidence. But only time will tell. I think he's a decent option. I know he's not owned in very many leagues because he hasn't done anything all season long because the quarterback position has been shaky. But then again, we'll just have to wait and see. He's better with Mason Rudolph in the lineup, so hopefully Rudolph can target him more. All right, moving on to the last option, Dallas Goedart. Zach Ertz is done. I don't know, man. It's insane. It is actually insane how Zach Ertz has become a 3-point tight end every week, and Dallas Goedert's the guy that's catching touchdowns. It's unfortunate, but that's just how it is. That's how 2019 is going to shake down. It's really unfortunate, but then again, there's nothing we can really do about it. So as of right now, we live with that, and potentially, if in fact you are in need of a tight end, Dallas Goedert's a guy who's scoring as of late, seeing more targets than his predecessor, the guy that is really one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Maybe they need to trade Zach Ertz. Honestly, like, they're not using him. It's just sad. Anyway, I'm getting depressed just talking about it. Moving on, let's talk about my quarterbacks on the week. All right, guys that if in fact, again, Drew Brees is gone, Matt Ryan's gone, Jared Goff is gone, Andy Dalton. Nobody's playing Andy Dalton, but he hasn't been bad in fantasy. Regardless, as of right now, the contributions of those three quarterbacks are going to need to be filled in your league. And if you're a team that is in need of a quarterback, here are the potential options going forward. Derek Carr versus the Lions. The Lions have given up a lot of points. They gave up 4 touchdowns to both Daniel Jones and Kirk Cousins in the past 2 weeks. Derek Carr looks fantastic this past week against the Houston Texans. Going forward, especially with Tyrell Williams back, should be good. Should be a great pickup at the quarterback position as a streaming option this week. Moving on to number 2, Jimmy Garoppolo. Garoppolo plays against the Arizona defense this coming Thursday. Short week, sure. This team wants to run the ball heavily, but again, he is still going to have a lot of value because they're going to score a lot of points against his defense, and he's going to be able to just pass a little dump off to Tevin Coleman or Breida or Kittle, Emmanuel Sanders. They're going to go and score. They're going to do the work for him instead of really, like him having to place a ball back shoulder on the pylon or something. No. It's going to be somebody else catching the ball and then them going and pretty much bringing Jimmy Garoppolo some value. Moving on to number 3. That's why Sam Darnold was there at 3. He just got pretty much copied over. Number 3, Sam Darnold. I understand it's a risky play, but in Week 9 he plays against the Miami Dolphins. I don't think it's a bad option. I think it's quite the decent option. I think, sure, he threw 3 interceptions this past week and 5 the week before. What was it, 4 the week before? He's going to turn over the ball. At this point, we just have to bite the bullet. And I don't think it's a bad option to play him against the Miami Dolphins this coming week. So we'll see. He's my number 3. Moving on to number 4, Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew's been as consistent as possible. And as of late, been really good. I would be surprised if he's not already owned in your league. But I wanted to go ahead and mention him as a pickup this coming week. In terms of the matchup, playing against the Houston Texans, not bad. The last time they played against the Houston Texans, it was a lower scoring affair between the two teams. I think it ended like 12-13. This coming week, with both these teams being I think they're on fire, both these teams. At least the NFC or the AFC South, all these teams are very good offensively. They're all, 500 or plus records. I think the Titans are 4-4, Jaguars are 4-4. If I'm not mistaken, the Colts are 5-2, and so are the Houston Texans, or are the Texans 6-2? I don't know. Have they had a bye week? No, they haven't. I think they're 6-2, or maybe 5-3. Either way, as of right now, not a bad option as a matchup that is probably going to be pretty juicy. And J.J. Watt's gone for the season, so a little bit less pressure on Gardner Minshew to have to get the ball out of his hands so quickly. Moving on to number 5, Daniel Jones had a monster game against the Detroit Lions. Not really a surprise. Detroit can't play defense, and then all of a sudden we get to have him playing against the Cowboys. The Cowboys defense, even though they've challenged teams, they haven't been fantastic. And I think there's a potential that Daniel Jones could have value in Week 9. Moving on to the last option, Ryan Fitzpatrick. For as bad as the Jets have been defensively, I think Fitzpatrick could be the Fitzmagic in Week 9, potentially even in Week 8. But this coming week, so the Jets just traded Leonard Williams, their all-pro defensive tackle, to the New York Giants. Okay, so be it. That's going to increase the value of the Giants defensively. But also, C.J. Mosley is going to be out for 5 to 6 weeks with a groin injury. So what does that mean? Their defense over there in New York for the Jets, decimated. And I think Ryan Fitzpatrick, if he continues to at least not turn over the ball and help them somewhat try to win a game, he could have some value. But obviously, I think they're trying to get the number 1 pick, so they'll lose eventually, but they're gonna compete. All right, moving on. Let's talk about defenses before we close out today's video. Starting off with number 1, the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles get to take on the Chicago Bears at home this coming week. Here's my thing. I do believe, this coming week they play against the Chicago Bears. That's right. I do believe Mitchell Trubisky has not been good. And if, in fact, they want to try to run the ball against the Eagles, it's going to be tough. And I think there is going to be a chance in which the Eagles pretty much just lock down this team, similar to how they locked down the Buffalo Bills this past week. So they're my number 1 option as a defensive waiver wire pickup. Moving on to number 2, the Buffalo Bills. Like I mentioned, if, in fact, let's say Case Keenum is not cleared for concussion protocol and they have to start Dwayne Haskins, I surely want to play the Buffalo Bills defense because they're going to be able to clamp up. I know they've not been good against the run, especially this past week, but they can tighten things up. They can play better. And I think Buffalo, not a bad option as a waiver wire pickup. If available, I don't think they will be, but there's a chance. Moving on, number 3, Dallas Cowboys. Daniel Jones is a decent quarterback, but if he does not get the ball out of his hands quick enough, and he's still a rookie, can make mistakes, the Dallas Cowboys could have some value this week as a defense coming off a bye week, preparing for this matchup. Not a bad option. Moving on to the Green Bay Packers, my number 4 option of the week. Green Bay's taking on the Chargers. The Chargers have not played well all season long. Phillip Rivers throwing interceptions. The team is fumbling left, right, and center. Barely able to win games, not scoring enough. There is a chance that the Green Bay Packers continue to keep on their streak, maybe perhaps advance to 8-1 after this coming week in Week 9 against the Chargers. Probably, there's a pretty good chance of that actually occurring. So Green Bay, pretty good option. Moving on to number 5. Okay, so here's the thing. I have the Denver Broncos at number 5 only because I'm thinking, all right, well, actually, it was prior. I even made this before Joe Flacco was out. Now that Joe Flacco's out, it's less of a competitive game, and it could be just the Browns the entire way. So maybe let's disregard this. Let's just go ahead and skip over this. They could have some value because of their pass rush against Baker. Baker somehow wants to continue to make mistakes, but I think they'll be better this coming week against the Broncos. So let's just go ahead and let's just leave the Broncos alone. Let's use number 6 to play as the number 5 and 6 options. The Jets and the Dolphins. In Week 9, both these teams play against each other. Both of them are very capable of turning over the ball and very capable of not playing well. So I think there is a good chance that both of these defenses could have value. And whether or not, depending on which one you think is going to win, you can go ahead and pick that up and play that. And probably have a decent week with it. I don't think it's a bad option at all to play like a Jets defense or a Miami defense against each other. You never know. Both these teams just not playing well offensively, and they both very easily could throw pick sixes in the game. All right, guys, that is basically it. Thank you, everybody, for watching. These were the Week 9 waiver wire targets for the 2019 fantasy football season. There's a lot of guys on this list. There's a lot of guys that maybe perhaps tonight, if Jalen Samuels wants to pop off, which he probably should, hopefully if he's even going to play, he's still questionable for God's sake. We'll see what happens. Maybe Mark Walton has a big game tonight. Maybe somebody else, maybe Kalen Ballage does. But only time will tell, and we'll figure that out when it's all established as of right now. But thank you again for watching. Tomorrow, running backs, starter sits, and then we'll talk about my mid-season MVPs of the fantasy football season, because this coming week is Week 9. We've passed the first 8 weeks. Fantasy football goes 16 weeks. So we'll go over the mid-season MVPs. I'll hand out some awards, etc., and we'll get going with that. But anyway, thank you everybody for watching, and until the next time, which will be tomorrow. See you guys. Peace.